Muck to you. Welcome to my takeout, my Emil Muck's takeout, my takes on all things considerable. Hey, if you're saying, hey, where are you going to be, Emil? Next, well, June 11th, that's Wednesday at 7 p.m. I'm going to be at Laughs Unlimited in Old Sacramento. I'm competing in the World Series of Comedy. So I'm just a little bit player. I'm not Shohei Ohtani. I'm just like, bat boy, but I'm going to be there. I can do my set. Come see me. Use the code GIVE. Say Emil Amok sent you and go to get your tickets. Get discounted tickets at VIPtickethub.com/unlimited tickets. Yeah, use that code if you're watching me, VIPtickethub.com/unlimited tickets, and use the code GIVE, GIVE. Say Emil Amok sent you. We're in the Ask Ya A Who Sent You. And it's for a comedy show. Starts at 7 o'clock. Laughs Unlimited. Old Sac, if you're within 100 miles of Sacramento. Not doing anything on a Wednesday night, check me out. World Series of Comedy. Yeah, I do. I do a 5-minute set on Wednesday. If I do well, I get to perform Thursday or Friday, like 7-10 minutes, something like that. And if I do really well, I'll perform on Saturday in the finals. Do 20 minutes. And it's a satellite of the World Series of Comedy. It's a great organization for comics. And there's comics of all kinds. They're, fledgling, middling, superstar. Really, I mean, the World Series of Comedy won't feature guys like Dave Chappelle or Kevin Hart, but it'll have people like me and some others. And they're all, like I said, it's a competition. World Series of Comedy, June 11th, 7 p.m., Laughs Unlimited, Old Sac. Come see me. I'm in the crew. I'm in the game. Use the tickets, if you're watching, VIPtickethub.com/unlimited tickets. Use the code GIVE, say Emil Amok sent you, and you get your tickets at a very nice discount. Let's put it that way, all right? Now, I want to mention also, it's the end of the week, and I haven't gotten around to putting my 20-minute set that I did of a story time at the Marsh in San Francisco. It's going to be up, but you got to go to Patreon to see that, and I'll put it up over the weekend. Patreon.com/Emil Amok's Takeout, and it'll give you an opportunity to pay to play. Yeah, I mean a nominal fee, but you'll get to see a 20-minute story time, which is different from the stand-up because it's all different. This is different from stand-up, which concentrates on punchlines. It's different from stories, which concentrate on narrative arc. It's all different. It's all part of what I do. Check it out on Patreon when I put it up this weekend. But in the meantime, don't forget, June 11th, WSOC, the World Series of Comedy. And now we go to this show, Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. Oh, the big news, of course, is Kilmar Abrego Garcia has been released. I mean, just as we are about to go on, the news came out. I'm getting this from the New York Times. It's being reported elsewhere. Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, the man at the center of a political and legal maelstrom, after he was mistakenly deported to El Salvador, has been returned to the U.S. to face charges related to transporting undocumented immigrants, according to an indictment unsealed on Friday. This is the fig leaf, right? They couldn't let Abrego Garcia come home and admit that they made a mistake. Now they say, oh, we are going to bring him back and he's going to face charges. Because he's not a good guy. He's still a bad guy, according to Trump, right? I mean, that's how you have to interpret this. Back to the Times report. The stunning move, which had been quietly planned for several weeks, could provide a much-needed off-ramp for the Trump administration, which has bitterly opposed a series of court orders to take steps to release him following his wrongful removal on March 15th. So this is the fig leaf, the Trump administration. They call it fig leaf or off-ramp. The Trump administration says, yeah, we made a mistake. because that's what they initially said, that they made a mistake. And now they're saying, oh, no, we're bringing him back. He's going to face charges here. Even though, yeah, it went all the way up to this, the Supreme Court said, hey, look, Trump, you got to have due process for these people. Or not the Supreme Court, but a higher court, right? And embarrassing as heck for the Trump administration. But imagine how Pam Bondi must have felt in all her duplicitousness when she told reporters at a news conference today, Abrego Garcia has landed in the United States to face justice. Oh, yeah. And you just got yourself a fig leaf, you, Pam Bondi, in the Trump Justice Department. So that's the way to look at that. That's just in, and we're going to talk about that and all these other things with Professor Daniel Phil Gonzalez in just a second. I want to talk about this other thing, though, because this is important. Because AAPI hate numbers are up, and all this stuff with Elon Musk and Donald Trump, let's face it, that's white on white hate crime, right? Elon Musk and Donald Trump, call it what you will. Lovers quarrel, bad breakup. A lot of people want to say this was a bromance gone bad. New York Post had a great headline, about I hate my ex, or whatever they used, ex, Trump or Musk's platform. But here's guys with big egos, big money, social platforms of their own, fighting it out. It's white on white hate. And I don't think anyone wins, right? Who wins on this? Not Elon. And we want him to lose, but the big question is, what did Democrats do? So I'll talk to Dan about that when I bring him up. But, all right, so that's white on white hate. But the thing about the Elon Trump story is that it distracts. Or maybe does it entertain? Does it really entertain? I bring this up because one of the stories that you probably didn't hear about is the new numbers from Stop AAPI Hate. They came out with their new report talking about the polarized 2024 election year. Here's what they found. Over half of AAPI adults experienced a hate act last year due to their race, ethnicity, or nationality. 53% compared to 49% the previous year. So it's up. Can you imagine? Over half of Asian Americans experienced a hate crime. And this is according to a new report released by Stop AAPI Hate, compiling a nationwide survey of nearly 1,600 AAPI adults and stories of hate acts submitted to Stop AAPI Hate's reporting center. If you think that AAPI hate has, gone down, or it's not, it's been impacted by, everyone's hating other people now, Asians are home free. No. The level of hate is actually inched higher. 53% compared to 49%. That's over half, more than half of AAPI adults. And here's the thing. Have you heard anyone report this? Really? Aside from, maybe the ethnic media? Have you heard it reported in the mainstream? No, they're talking about Elon. They're talking about Donald Trump. They're talking about white on white hate, which frankly is kind of amusing. It's more entertaining and distracting from other big stories like what's going on in the world, like the xenophobia toward China. And even though on the very just a few days after Donald Trump declared war on Harvard and international students, especially the students from China, he's got this meeting with Xi, Premier Xi, President Xi in China, or telephone call, and they said, oh, it was a friendly conversation. Oh, we're gonna get together. So yeah, friendly with Xi, but dumps on Harvard, which means the xenophobia continues in America, even though Donald Trump is playing kissy face with Xi suddenly because of the trade talks. This is part of the distraction, or part of the sleight of hand that people don't see. I mean, no one talked about the she conversation very much early on in the day, maybe, but then later in the day, when the German chancellor came by, right, for an Oval Office meeting, that no one even talks about the German guy. And today's D-Day, right? And I'm sure there was time for that. D-Day plus 81. But all they're talking about is the Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Distraction. So back to this Stop AAPI hate. 53%, over half of AAPI adults experience hate, according to Stop AAPI Hate. General hate experiences were similarly high across lines of gender, geographic income, political party, birthplace. Okay, so it was pretty high to that level. The major difference was age, with 72% of young adults aged 18 to 29 experiencing hate, compared to 54% among adults 30 to 44, 46 among those 45 to 59, and 44% among those 60 and over. So if you're an old OG guy, you're safe. If you're young, you're getting your butt kicked. 72% of young adults age 18 to 29. That's significant. Pacific Islander adults are more likely to experience physical harm or contact, specifically 23% compared to South Asians, 4%, East Asians 12, Southeast Asians 13. So they're going after Pacific Islanders, probably because is it a stereotype to say they may be more belligerent? Pacific Islanders, big Samoan guys, maybe, I don't know. 23% though, compared to South Asians, Indians, Pakistanis 4%, East Asians, Chinese 12%, Southeast Asians, Thai, Vietnamese 13%. I wonder where they put Filipinos. With the Pacific Islanders, the most common hate acts were harassment, being called a racial slur. Oh, racial slur. I've been called a racial slur. Institutional discrimination, being refused service by a business employee. 48% of AAPI adults experienced the former. That's institutional. And 24% experienced the latter, being refused by, no, God, I hate former and latter, because now you got to go back and say, what is it? Anyway, it's high. And they're saying things like, in 2024, as in the previous year, the top 3 sites of Asian hate were online spaces, 29%, public spaces like streets and park, 37%, and businesses, 31%. So, of AAPI adults who did experience hate, over half, or 53%, experienced acts that were intersectional and targeting other aspects of their identity, in addition to their race, like gender. Oh, you're an Asian woman. Or class. Oh, you're a poor Asian, 20%. Oh, you're an old Asian, 19%. Oh, you're an Asian who needs a green card, 15%. So there's the intersectional hate. So it's kind of interesting. Overall, 77%, over 3 in 4 of those who experienced a hate act, did not report to a formal authority or agency, which is stupid. You got to report these things. So just because you think that the time of, Trump saying China virus or Kung flu, you think that's over. It's not over. More than half of all Asian American adults say, AAPI adults say they experienced some kind of hate, 53%, up from last year. So that's that report. And like I said, if you didn't hear it anywhere else, I'm glad you're hearing it here for the first time. Stop AAPI Hates Report. So let's bring up my friend, the esteemed Professor Emeritus Asian American Studies, College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University, Daniel Phil Gonzalez, to the program. Hello, Dan. How are you?
Good afternoon.
So, yeah,
Happy
happy
Friday.
Friday to you. So, what do you think?
Thanks for
You're
having
welcome.
me.
What do you think about that report? Stop AAPI hate. They were associated for a time. I think maybe.
No
Yeah.
surprises. No surprises.
Yeah.
It's bound to happen. Uh, it's kind of interesting, right? Especially in light of the fact that there are conservative elements within our
Mm.
communities that actually helped usher in
Oh, Donald Trump.
the president
Yeah.
administration that voted for him. That there was a major shift, right, in the voting
Yeah.
populace, and that a lot of people of color voted Mr. Trump in, and that's the reality of what we're
Yeah.
facing.
Yeah. But
People bought into what Trump was selling once again.
yeah. But you know what's odd to me is that some people may not think of it as Trump related. They'll just think of it as, well, during COVID, Trump said, China virus and Kung flu and that kind of thing, and we saw a lot of hate, and then and all that's passed now, and I think maybe people think that the assumption is maybe there is no hate, maybe toward us, right? No AAPI hate, but now this says no, it's still there. In 2024, last year, very polarized election year, over half said they experienced it. So this is a lagging indicator. Do you? I guess the question now is it still present? Is it still there from 2024 as we move into 2025, or is it worse?
Wait, oh, you think it could? You think it would go away, or that it would reduce by about 20 or 30%? Look, what people don't understand is, once again, I don't know how many times I have to say
Say it
this,
again.
right? Uh, Mr. Trump is a racist. He is an avowed racist. He is extremely motivated by his racism. He has people in his cabinet, all right, illustrative
Yeah.
Stephen Miller, right, who are avowed racists, whose intentions are very clear. You know, the problem with the American public and the problem with a lot of people of color is they uh, they don't distinguish between outright, in your face, aggressive racism,
Mm.
right? And racism that is presented amidst subterfuge of some righteous legal objective or social objective,
Yeah.
right? Like we're trying to get rid of the criminals, right? In these communities, and all of these organized
Mm.
gangs. Okay, and so when the evidence comes out that there's a complete lack of due process and that many of these people have never been shown to actually be involved in gangs or be guilty of any outright criminal activity, right? uh, People kind of ignore that, and they don't see that as de facto racism. De facto meaning, in fact, that is what both the motivation and the goal, right, is to exclude people of color from this society, and at the very least, to diminish at all their influence in the direction of the society and in their participation in the
Right, right.
society.
Well, as I was asking the question, do you think from this lagging indicator that the the hate toward Asian Americans has stopped? What we have seen in 2025 is Donald Trump fanning the xenophobia against Asians when he calls for an end to Harvard and admitting international students, the bulk of which are Asian or Chinese, Asian. Uh, which, by the way, today a district judge, almost in the way that this is supposed to play out, Trump does something unlawful, a district judge stops it. So now Trump has been stymied there, but he keeps at it. And so I imagine, like I said, all he has to do is say, oh, something's wrong with the Chinese. They're connected with the Chinese government. It's an extension of the old. It's like it's like Trump's version of McCarthyism. Oh, they're communists. Oh, they're Chinese. Oh, they're in our schools as researchers and professors, and you know,
Well, and that's
yeah,
been a
and their
pattern, right?
students.
That's been
Yeah,
a pattern.
they've come on down from the they're the researchers, they're the PhDs, down to they're the actual students, down as low as the undergraduate level, being used by China. So I think the xenophobia is there. So probably the spillover toward the general AAPI community is going to be there too. So it doesn't surprise me. 50% Asians feeling.
When you had any
Mm,
experiences of let's say um, verbal
mm,
assault
yeah,
of some sort, right? That was clearly racially motivated, right? In other words, that you got called a chink or
yeah.
something like that. Did you ever get called a Filipino?
No, no,
Did you ever get called a flip or anything like that?
no.
But more than likely, we got called a Jap or
Yeah,
a
or
chink,
some China actually.
right? And more often than not, I got
Yeah.
called a
Well,
chink,
I got
right?
called. I was walking in New York not too long ago. Someone called me Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan. They
Yeah,
did.
sure, that's could You should have struck a pose and said, "Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah, I
chan your
said no.
butt."
Yeah, and I do my own stunts too. A hole. I'm gonna get you. Yeah.
Yeah, and then hope the guy doesn't
Well,
have a
that's the
gun.
thing. You got to watch out. Well, so I mean, I'm just saying, um, the xenophobia continues. The xenophobia continues, and
Well, yeah, it's the racism. First of all, is a part of the American
uh-huh.
institution. Okay, from like Ibram X. Kennedy's classic book at this point, right? Stamped from the beginning,
Uh-huh.
right? The society was based on
Yeah.
race, okay, and class, and the two merged, right? And people want that time
Yeah.
back. It's not everybody, it's not all white people, but there's a significant number of people now represented represented by the people who happen to be in
Oh,
power, right? They run the entire federal
yeah.
government, okay? Both houses of Congress, the presidency, and the courts, at least the Supreme
Mhm.
Court. Okay, so so now is the time that people can feel uh, not only that they can exercise their white
Mhm.
privilege, right, which they always deny they have,
Yeah.
right, but they actually come out and they feel like they've got
Yeah.
cover, and so we have to be very careful. We have to be very attentive, right, and we have to try and keep our people safe. That is not a pleasant task. It isn't a pleasant task. No, just like when I talk to my African American friends, people who have kids, and they talk about having to have the talk, especially with
Yeah.
their sons, right? Because the black male, is much greater
Yeah.
risk of violence, and even violence at the hands of police, than black females.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the talk is designed, and it's part of black history and black practice, out of necessity. Okay. Now, what we have to learn as AAPIs, as Native Hawaiians, okay, we have to learn that that also applies to us. It depends on where you live. It depends on what the local culture is
Yeah.
like, right? And you have to be honest in your appraisal of your circumstance. You have to be factual. You have to be honest. And if you look at some of the things that are quoted, right, in the report, okay, uh, there's clearly a pattern. There's a
Yeah.
geographic pattern. Okay, uh, I live in San Francisco. Most of my activity is within like three or four of the nine main Bay Area counties, right? But I am aware that when I go further east, the greater likelihood that I will be confronted by some form of racial epithet or some kind of assault of some sort, not a physical one necessarily, but I also have to be aware that that's a possibility as well. Okay, and that's not a pleasant thing. It is not a pleasant thing to have your conscience,
Yeah.
right, have to make those considerations just because you're driving 30 miles to the east of San
Yeah,
Francisco.
but they also talk about how people aren't reporting these things. Does that strike you as odd? I mean, they
Yeah.
said 3 and 4, or 77% who experience these things did not report to a formal authority or agency, which means that of the majority of Asians who felt something, if they felt it, but they didn't feel like it was necessary to tell anyone. Which is why, if you are ready to go public and report it, that would be breaking news. That would be breaking news. But no one cares. Is that it? Is that how we should see this?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is frustration with government. They know that the police don't do
Yeah.
anything about it. I mean, if it's a mild case of verbal assault, then the police are going to look at you like you're going to bother us with this. I mean, if there's no violence involved, and there's no clear threat involved, then they don't do anything about it. They also know about the stories where people have gone to the courts, and these do make news. These stories, unfortunately,
Yeah.
make news. Like the family in South Tahoe, right, that has a neighbor that's constantly haranguing them, and they have TROs against them. It does no
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
right? It does no good. They go to the court. And so people, number one, I think, understand that the likelihood that anybody's going to do anything about it is very low. And that's probably so unless it's a very serious attack and they really fear the possibility of physical harm, right? They will be less inclined to report it. And then to whom do they report it, right? Is there common knowledge that stop Asian hate, for example, that you can
No.
email them your report, and it's not because we don't play that up enough in our
But
own
it means
communities.
that, man, we're gonna be living with this almost forever if we don't speak out. If no one takes it seriously, we're gonna have this slow burn. It's like, hey, we
No,
don't have to
I
worry
think
about the big.
I think they take it seriously. I think the people are taking it seriously, but it takes two
Yeah.
to tango. You have to have positive reaction from
Well,
the other
what
side.
I'm saying
You
is
know,
that we'll only pay attention to the big fire, the blazing fire, the blazing racism. But everyone else gets a little slow burn, like getting, like little stink from the edge of from the edge of a cigarette or something. We suffer these minor burns, and then that's okay. That's okay for us. Or that, that what bothers me is that, look, anti-Semitism, same thing. It's it's there. It's always there, and we can't eradicate it. Maybe the lesson for Asians is, hey, we're gonna have to live with this or fight it in our own way. Otherwise, it just becomes, we never want it to be normal, but we may never be able to eradicate it fully.
well, but it is
Yeah.
normal. It is normal. And so what we should be doing is struggling to denormalize it. I don't even
Yeah.
know if
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
word.
Denormalizing
Okay,
it.
but that's the whole. We have to be willing to attack it and to keep the consciousness of the issue in the forefront.
Yeah.
Okay, and the situation with American with Native Americans, with First Nation people, is
Yeah.
the same. It's continuous, right? It doesn't go away. Institutionally, they're still at a disadvantage. Although all people of color, have made some gains in the past 50
Yeah.
years or so. But what we're facing right now is a very well designed reversal. That's their intention, is to reverse all
Yeah.
of those things. And it was very clear that they were building this movement when they came out with the adaptation of the term
Oh yeah.
CRT, right, to
Critical
their
race
advantage. And people don't even know what it stands for. All they know is that it has something to do with people of color, that has something to do with racial
theory.
minorities, right? Even though in some states those racial minorities are no longer clearly the racial
Yeah.
minority,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it just, I just think that every time we get these, I'm glad that Stop AAPI they have this method so people in this nationwide survey can self-report, They do a survey of 1,600 AAPI adults, and they collect the stories that people report on their own, and it helps give a
Yeah.
real sense of that. Here's some data. You may not hear it from the police because people don't report it, but here's some data, and don't forget us. Right? It's a thing that says to people, don't forget that this AAPI hate exists. And as we come into um, June, and we come into Vincent Chin, the Vincent Chin month, where we remember probably the most famous Asian American hate crime. Uh, it's This is still with us, and we can't forget. Can't forget.
Well, it's yeah, and it's famous not only because of the way that it was committed, but the way that
Yeah.
injustice was
Still,
rendered,
still,
right? That there was
and
injustice
still,
rendered.
still is the case. So, well, I mean that's something. Now, Elon Musk and Donald Trump fighting, I call it white on white hate crime. It did distract from this report. I mean, no one cares about this report, but everyone's talking about the Elon. Uh,
You mean no one outside the Asian American or
right,
Pacific Islander
right.
communities care about this report, and then only a minority of our members of our communities are interested enough to pay attention
Right,
to this report,
right.
right? So it's a minority that even have a level of consciousness that we need to develop within the community. I mean, just developing that level of consciousness also might affect the way they vote,
Yeah,
right? Uh, exercise other
yeah,
rights as well. So and it might affect the way that they look at public education and what should be preserved and what should not be preserved. Because now there's an attempt outright, right, to bring more conservative teachers to the
or
universities,
to
right? How do you
and
measure that? How do you measure what's appropriately
and
conservative,
what's the
right?
story in San Francisco where parents are against ethnic studies classes being taught because they say that
Right.
this is some kind of inculcation, it's some kind of you know uh, indoctrination and not education. When to deny the history of people of color being taught in schools, which is necessary, ethnic studies, which, well, I mean, you must be kind of insulted to hear what some people in public.
I'm not just insulted. I'm not
Mm,
surprised. Like I said, when people started bandying about the term CRT without even knowing what
mm,
it was, but simply that it was un-American,
mm.
right? And if they did bother to understand it, it says critical race theory, right? And so they interpret something that's critical
Mm,
of race, right, theoretical or not, as being anti-white. So that is an indirect admission,
mm.
right? That racism does in fact
Yeah,
exist. And so what they don't want is somebody to be critical of racism. That's really what it's about. And so if the people are anti ethnic studies in San Francisco, that element has always
yeah.
been here. Okay. And especially in the so-called elite institutions, the private schools, that element has always been here.
But the thing is,
Uh,
the idea of history being anti-white. History is history. It doesn't have a bias. It just here's what happened. But I suppose
well, it can
can have.
have a bias. History is rendered, right? History is rendered by human beings, and they can have biases. But the bias, the overwhelming traditional bias in American
Is toward
society,
what?
right, is to
Elevate the white.
yes, exactly, is to look at Anglo-European side of
Mm.
society, right, and as majority society. And it was much easier to do that up until the last 30 or 40 years because the overwhelming majority of people in the society were in
Yeah,
fact
well,
white.
sure.
Okay. So it was very simple for them to enforce that. The problem that they're having now is, and I cited this decades ago, is that there's this growth of
Yeah.
communities of color. And many of the communities of color are producing people who ascend to the highest levels, right, of achievement, especially in high profile
Yeah.
professions. Okay. The lagging profession was probably law. Okay. But the profession where we were most commonly encountered was
Yeah.
always medicine. It always started with medicine, and it started with nurses, and then med techs, okay, and doctors. And the thing that most people, I think, are exposed to is the fact that so many people have risen to the highest levels of achievement in all those professions, in engineering, right, in any of the hard
Yeah.
sciences, right, in many of the creative sciences. How about musical
Yeah. Well, the
performance,
the
right?
demographic change is there. People see it, and I'm just saying that yeah, the bias is there now, or they can't uphold the white bias any longer, and so people just want a more generalized kind of what happened. Where people came in, and it's not necessarily a white anti-white history, but why is it that when I grew up, Andrew Jackson was considered a hero, stone cold hero, no doubt about it, and now people
Yeah.
are smart enough because they are in they're in the academy, and they have read the history, and they say, well, wait a minute, Andrew Jackson, are you get Trail of Tears, Andrew Jackson, um, he's no saint. Oh, these guys own slaves, presidents, you know I mean,
Sure, the growth of the KKK during
it
that
was
period.
all
Yeah.
people are seeing aspects that never were looked at or sifted through, and now the truth is coming out, and it's making people see, look at people like Jackson, and even Woodrow Wilson, and you know all the presidents who were slaveholders, even looking at the Ivy League institutions. Before Trump was on them for international students, uh, Ivy League institutions came under fire for being on slave land, and being run by slaveholders. So anyway,
Well, today, I read something that came by on my phone, on my news feed on my phone, and it is that the Trump administration, McMahon, the Secretary of
Linda,
Education, is looking at both the UC system and the CSU system for cutting back
right?
federal funding, and that was inevitable. Okay, they attacked private institutions in New York. They began to attack public institutions in New York. New York is clearly a blue
Yeah,
state, right? New York City is from the conservative, the so-called contemporary conservative point of view, is a den of sin and inequity, right? Um, California is the next major
yeah.
target. Okay, that it was inevitable that they would look at these
Eh,
schools as well. How is that going to affect us? People are looking at Harvard and saying, okay, they've cut back on funding, federal funding that was already committed, right? And that the university itself has already extended itself by spending money that it anticipated was coming from this federal funding. And so the federal government has now interfered with promised contracts. Okay, that's the way that you really have to look at this. The federal government is violating its own contractual obligations to major universities. Okay, and so now they're going to do the same thing here in California. Inevitable way to go. They're going to attack the universities in Oregon and in Washington as well. Washington's,
yeah.
UW is one of the most important top tier institutions in the country. It's inevitable that they're going to attack UW as well. So it's not just going to be private institutions like Stanford, or USC. It is clearly the UC system and the CSU system
Yeah.
as well. So how are we going to fight this? How do we fight it?
I don't. I
We just watch our science
Yeah.
departments lose its lose its accreditation?
Yeah.
Right? Do we watch our students go without the necessary experience to actually build the area of the sciences, the necessity of
See,
scientific research, of
see,
medical research in
at
American
some point, I
society?
think people are just going to have to like open their eyes, and uh, they they can't help but be woke just to see what's going on. And as soon as it hits them, like, oh, my kid or me or my job or this, maybe they'll get uh, excited about maybe doing something to stop what's going on, because it's like a it's like a dismantling from the top, from orders of Trump and federal funding, and then of course that's the ironic thing with Musk, because he was dismantling everything too, which is really the other sad part about their public fight, because here they're fighting, and you look at all the things and they look like toddlers. They look like babies, throwing food at each other. And people talk about, oh, it's a divorce. It's people having a, lovers quarrel. But no, this is like two babies throwing throwing Gerber baby food at each other. And what's happening? They're taking apart our government, our institutions, and real people are getting hurt. People are working in the federal government. People are doing real things, important things. And
Well, there's one thing the possibility is now that the Doge
yeah,
people are actually going to be under attack. We'll see what happens, but I believe that once again, people have to feel the
yeah,
harm on a personal level, okay, and they have to be able to focus their anger and focus their action, right, their political action against those people who are responsible for doing the
yeah.
harm, okay, and so I'm kind of tired of the fight oligarchy, right, issue. I think you ought to just come down right down to it and say fight
Like, yeah,
corruption, and point out that this corruption is occurring right in your face, and that corruption is destroying American institutions. Now, people say, well, next year, if the Dems have their pants up and are ready to go,
yeah.
and they're ready to work, and they're ready to take strong positions and act on them, they might take back at least the lower
I
house.
don't know.
Okay, yeah, that's a promise. But even if they
Yeah,
do, they still would have to deal with the upper house. They still would have to deal with the
yeah.
presidency.
I don't.
So you would be looking at the greater likelihood that it would be like a situation where they impeached
Yeah,
Trump twice, right? With literally little effect, very
yeah.
little effect.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, obviously not
I
removing from
don't have
office.
much. I don't know. I mean, you hope the Democrats will be able to wage something, but um, I don't know. And you were talking about the cuts to California, how California is next, and this whole thing started. The real, well, it's always been in the works, but it became more in the public realm when Donald Trump started talking about the trans high school kid who competing
All
in
right.
the state track tournament, says, we're going to cut your funds. We're going to take away your high speed rail. We're going to, on and on.
Yeah, well, yeah, but the Republican right in California has always been against the high
Yeah.
speed rail, and they've thrown every standard against it, and they've used, the rail goes through
Yeah.
red counties.
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
problem.
but the thing, I mean, they mentioned it, but now they're really gunning for it. And they've got, in the past, uh, it just, on the federal level, it just never got to that point where Trump was ready to act. But now it seems like he's ready to act. I think it would be stupid, because California could use a high speed rail, even and they're coming up with ways that they can that deal with it. But anyway, getting back to the whole cuts and going back after California, uh, this whole thing started with the high school kid, who won, and is a transgender athlete, and that is another form of discrimination that Donald Trump wants to make, his thing. He's against trans people,
It's just that
LGBT.
it was another device that was useful for them to criticize California. But the reality is, since California has been what our legislature is 2/3 right
Mm,
Democrat. Um, uh, Even before that, we were the state that came down with liberal court decisions. You know how California State Supreme Court
yeah,
decisions often got appealed up to the Supreme Court of the
yeah,
United States, and we won many of
yeah,
those decisions. So a lot of the so-called liberal decisions made by federal courts, including the Supreme Court of the United States, right, were heavily influenced by the California State Supreme Court decisions. Okay, so uh, that's never been
yeah.
reversed. At the most, we've had a greater number of moderate and centrist justices in the California State
Yeah.
Supreme Court, but it is never turned to the conservative side as completely as the SCOTUS, as the
Yeah, but
Supreme Court of
even
the
Trump
United
is worried.
States.
He's angry there. He got mad at Leonard Leo, the Federalist Society, and you know he's just like
Yeah, yeah.
this is
Yeah, but he's a traditional
yeah,
conservative. That's the problem. He's a traditional,
but
true conservative. He believes in the
but it's more
Constitution.
like another example, the early sign that Trump is willing. If you go against him, he'll take you on no matter what. And I thought he
Yeah,
wouldn't go after
yeah.
Leonard Leo, but
Oh,
Trump.
oh no. He'll go
Yeah,
after
Trump is
anyone.
mad at the people that Leo suggested, the three conservatives who now waver against Trump, and he's mad against Amy Coney Barrett and Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. And so, uh, given that, it's not surprising that he would go after Elon Musk. I know when we first talked about it like a week ago, I thought, okay, Musk is gone. That's good, but now it's Trump likes to use all this as entertainment. Just here's another thing. Here's another. It's part of the chaos theory, and it's distracting. Uh, because how many people have heard about the AAPI report that we were talking about earlier on? So uh, I, I guess
Oh
the
yeah.
thing. I mean, how many people are talking about Ukraine and Russia? You know, and how Trump has suddenly changed his tune. So it's not like I'm going to end this in one day because it's too damn hard. And now it's more like, well, I'll give it. I'll give them both. Like actually, this is ironic thing about Trump saying, it's like, he's describing his fight with Musk, saying, number one, that Elon has Trump derangement syndrome, and number two, he said, well, like this is like two people fighting. It's like a hockey match. You let them fight for a while.
Yeah.
Well, I think he's actually describing, what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. He's letting them fight for a little while, and this distraction.
Yeah. That's really
Yeah, and this
disgusting.
distraction.
That's really disgusting. Yeah, well, a week ago though, he was saying there's just too much. There's too much human killing
Exactly.
going on.
It's just
There's too much. There's too much dying on both sides. And then this week it's, well, you got
yeah,
to let them
and
fight,
actually he was
and their
yeah,
children. Their
but
children.
he was talking
Oh
about him and Musk about letting him fight. He wasn't talking about Russia. I don't think. I think he was talking about himself. Anyway.
no, he was literally talking
Oh,
about
okay.
Ukraine and Russia. It
That's
was
right.
in
He said,
that
"Let him fight.
context.
Let him fight." So the thing is, they're fighting, and now it's like Donald Trump, the man who runs the country and the world, is now just acting as a play-by-play guy, a hockey play-by-play guy. Let him fight.
Oh
Let him
God.
fight. He's not.
Yeah.
He's not doing
That's
anything
fine.
he should be doing more.
Well, I'm just hoping that he doesn't reduce the support, the level of support that Ukraine is
Uh,
currently getting.
but it's happening.
So, now Russia's response was predictable, but it wasn't as strong as I thought it might be. And now, Ukraine is showing the ability to anticipate
Yeah.
Putin and outsmart him in very ingenious ways. And so I feel that they must know what kind of responses they're going to get from Putin, and I think they have to have a second and third
Yeah,
move.
but you
You
know
know,
what's happening is that Trump now he was praising Ukraine the other day, saying he admired them, right, for being they were gutsy. He admired them. What By admiring Ukraine, he only extends it for Putin to do his thing, which he did today. Putin bombed
right?
Ukraine today.
That's
So
right.
all Donald Trump is doing is really enabling. He's not enabling Ukraine. He's enabling Putin,
No,
which is what he's wanted to do anyway. So he's happy,
yeah.
really. And
Well, I don't know. I think he's probably anticipating that some of the European governments are
oh,
going to
they
come to
are.
his aid. You know what was concerning to me is that Poland got a
Oh yeah,
conservative, uh, hyper right person as their
that guy,
new prime
that guy
minister.
won
So yeah,
with Trump's backing. See,
yep, yes, he did.
this is a problem, and because here we are remembering D-Day plus 81, big day, turned the war in World War II, 81 years ago. But it really did. I mean, you're really talking about the signs of how a military alliance with, pre-nascent NATO, you know, is a possibility and how it could work. And now here we are in 2025 when NATO is falling apart. It seems right before our eyes because of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I don't know if it's falling apart, but it is in a dangerous state. Yeah,
You know,
I think a couple of the major um, military nations have to act. I think France, England, and Germany have to act, and I think if they do, with more support to Ukraine, and it's out in the public, uh, that a lot of the other countries will also contribute. But it really concerns me that you have now Belarus in the north, and you have Poland on the west
yeah,
of Ukraine that have right wingers in their leading
yeah.
politicians.
And the right is really it's it's really the second coming of it's illiberal democracy or illiberal
Yeah,
illiberal democracy, which essentially is the second coming of Hitler. It's evolving to that. But if you see Hitler as the prime mover of illiberalism, well, here we are. We're not that far. We got the balance is shifting. You mentioned the leaders in other European countries, and they represent a real threat to NATO. And if the United States, NATO's big ally, is leaning toward the autocrats, leaning toward the liberal, I know
yeah, yeah. Right,
it's a real
definitely.
threat.
I misspoke, by the way. Navrachki won the presidency, not the prime. The Tusk is still the prime minister. But what this does is it gives the very conservative law and justice conservative party
Uh,
the ability to veto the actions of Tusk. So Tusk is very pro European Union,
yeah, you know,
and obviously the Law and Justice Group is anti EU.
the whole thing about yeah. I just I lost my thought. I was going to say something about how
About well, you were saying that that NATO, is in a, I said, in a dangerous
yeah,
state because they're not able to or willing to exert power, and they really need
yeah,
to at
and
this
then
point.
really, well, this is related to what I was going to say, I think. But you have people here who, when you say NATO, they don't care. They in the United States.
Actually, I think it's worse than that. I think that the right has look. How far back do we have to go to look at uh, defunding NATO.
Oh,
The while George, while Bush one was a very pro NATO
yeah,
guy. Okay, his son was willing to back out of
yeah,
NATO, not back out, but at least not fund it as heavily as they were. And so you can go back a full generation and see that there has been a building anti-NATO attitude in the general American
yeah,
public, and that's because of the way that the Republicans have been able to manipulate media and the kind of statements that they make, however half truth or completely lacking in fact their positions may be. And that's what it's all about. I mean, all of a sudden,
yeah,
Mr. Trump is acting like he's a peacenik,
yeah,
right? And the reason, I'm against all war, except if it's between Russia and Ukraine, then you got to let them
yeah.
fight.
He's no peacenik, that's for sure. I mean, I don't know what he stands for, except he wants to appease or ingratiate himself to Putin. I mean, that's the lovers' quarrel that you got to worry about. What's happening with Putin and
Yeah.
Trump?
Well, but his relationship with Putin is a vehicle to more
Oh yeah,
money. Basically, he's driven by the desire for the accumulation of even more
yeah,
wealth.
yeah, and
Uh, and
yeah, you're right, and also, but he's just trying to keep Putin and Xi, Russia and China, the only powers that make sense, or to him, the three top powers. What if it's just a world where it's all just the three big guys, and they do everything, and everyone else sort of fights for the crumbs? I think he's.
yeah, well, how do you think Putin though and Xi look at
Oh
Trump?
yeah, Putin and Xi, they have, as they say, intercourse, or they have engagement. You know, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. No, they have shown a lot of brotherly
Yeah,
love
yeah.
recently,
So
and don't forget that Kim has also shown a lot of brotherly love and sent 10,000 North Korean troops to
yeah,
assist Mr. Putin. And I'm really curious as to how well those troops have been doing because they didn't have the proper amount of training, and there hasn't been a full military engagement by there's no seasoned troops. Let's just put it
no.
that way. And so I got a feeling that they were cannon fodder to the Ukrainians, and we hear nothing about
Right.
it.
Well,
So
that's the thing. It's another one of those casualties of the news suck that is Donald Trump, where you hear about all the other all
yeah,
the other things, and you don't hear about really what's going on in Ukraine, in the war, which always sounds to me like just a street fight out of control. It doesn't sound as. That's why when it's actually more strategic, we don't hear much about that really, but until after.
no,
But it does sound like kind of like a street fight out of control that we could control really if the United States had a little more power over Putin. They don't. They should, but they don't. And then in the meantime, then
yeah,
they gotta feed more weapons to Ukraine, or
yeah,
or they become vulnerable.
yeah.
So, uh,
Yeah, the problem is that the United States makes the most right now the most effective kinds of weapons for the kind of war that Ukraine has to fight. Um, Everybody else is lagging. They from the F-18s all the way down to the HIMARS, right? And the
yeah,
Patriots. I'm talking about the missile
yeah,
class. Remember when Biden said, "Yeah, but you don't want to. We will cease to supply you if you transgress by firing any of these weapons into Russian
yeah,
territory." You know, that was really one of the dumbest things I have ever heard. Any president of the United States say, "We're going to give you these weapons, but you can't do it." And then that means that the Russians can go ahead and keep
yeah,
firing into civilian areas, right, and killing people in the performance of war crimes. I mean, that was really ridiculous. And so I consider that position just as bad as the withdrawal from Afghanistan. I mean, remember how weak their rationale was? That it was actually Trump and his administration that set this deadline?
Yeah.
You don't have to observe that. You don't have to observe that. They made the same mistake that Obama made when he did his timed retreat, right, from Iraq.
Yeah.
Same mistake. And what happened immediately was a reformation, right, of an Al Qaeda unit, right, and there you go. So the Democrats have not been doing a good job of handling military stuff at all.
Hey, Dan, as we were talking, or as you were talking, as we've been convening here, the New York Times is reporting this bulletin headline: Supreme Court lets Doge view Social Security data. So, if you thought that Doge was going to lose some kind of power because Elon Musk is
that's horrible. I don't know. Do you think the American
here's
public gets it? Do you think they get it? I
well,
know some of the people who've been complaining and been calling out Republican congressmen uh, have
well,
said outright that they are really angry about Doge access to their personal data, and so the
well,
Social
well,
Security data is the utmost.
well. Let me read you the lead. Supreme Court on Friday today let members of the Department of Government Efficiency, formed by Elon Musk, have access to sensitive records of the Social Security Administration. The court's order was brief and unsigned, which is typical when the justices rule on emergency applications, which this was, but it also gives unsigned orders give the justices a kind of cover who did what, but you can kind of guess. The Trump administration said it needed the data to root out waste and fraud and to modernize the agency's operation, which sounds like BS to me. Two labor unions and an advocacy group represented by Democracy Forward Foundation sued to block access, saying that much of the information was deeply personal and protected by private laws. The court responded that the agency may proceed to give Doge access to the records necessary to do its work. And then, in a second unsigned order on Friday, today, the court handed Doge a second victory, ruling that for now, the organization does not have to turn over internal records to government watchdog group as part of a public records lawsuit. So the court's three liberal members, Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, dissented from both. So 6-3. 6-3.
Yeah,
So
well,
that's where we are. And I guess, the Supreme Court, the conservatives just say, Doge, do your job. The the conservatives that Trump was upset with, they went along with Alito and Thomas, and with Roberts. Roberts too. He's a gang leader. So
yeah, everybody keeps talking about Robert's concern for his legacy. What legacy? It's
he's
blown away, man. It
he's
was blown
destroyed it
away.
down. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
Citizens United was that was the start of a negative series of negative decisions, right?
yeah. Oh,
Including obviously the Dobbs
and
decision.
and
Yeah.
and don't forget his wife.
Oh
His
yeah,
wife making all the money, so that he can live on a pauper's Supreme Court salary. Oh, pauper! I guess it's a couple 100,000, right? I mean,
yeah, a couple
lifetime,
100,000 a year. Yeah,
yeah, lifetime gig. So and status. So, but meanwhile, his wife can sort of trade on the fact that he's who he is, and so that's a form of look. It's not Donald Trump corruption, but it's up there. It's up there, and people have reported on it, and it doesn't ring any bells because look, if you live in a Trump era, how you got to be pretty damn corrupt. You got to be pretty damn corrupt in order for people to get really upset. And who's going to be that corrupt? The devil? The devil? I mean, you got to be like, you got to be the devil.
You don't need the
You know,
devil, man. You just get, you got you got the Republican Party. You don't need the devil.
yeah. I Anyway, this is the world that we live in, and thank goodness we have a distraction like NBA basketball.
Yeah, yeah,
Because that was some game. I was giving up on the Pacers, and I thought, oh,
yeah.
okay, okay, KC can't blow it.
They
They
were
did.
yeah.
They blew it.
That's
They blew it. They
yeah, yeah,
blew it.
yeah. They
They
blew
blew
it
it.
at what 25, 25
Yeah,
turnovers.
it was up
That was
there.
very
But
warrior like. Very warrior like.
yeah, right. Well, yeah, you know, because they think they're too cool for school, right? They throw it around. Hey, hey, and the Warriors are. But see, OKC is young. They could do all that stuff, and they can make up for it. You think, but then they don't. So frustrating game. I was in and out of the game. I didn't really want to get sucked into it, and then I did get sucked into it the final 5 minutes. I thought, oh, well, what happened here? They're going to blow it. I saw the lead shrinking, and so anyway, it'll make it interesting because it's not going to be a blowout. The Pacers are good, and now they got a 1 game lead. So now they'll get blown out in the second game. It'll go 1 point game, blowout game, 1 point game. Yeah, so I don't know. But it makes it interesting. So, Dan,
Hey,
D Day,
D Day, D Day.
D Day plus 81. People should know how important this is, huh?
Well, it was the thing that led to the end of the Second World War, at least in the European front.
Yeah.
And it enabled the Allies to turn their attention to Asia and close out that side of the war. Ugly part of that is the use of nuclear weapons
Yeah.
in Japan. Um,
Well, do you know what D Day even stands for?
no, actually, I can't.
D.
I think I did once, but but
Yeah.
I forgot.
I'm not putting you on the spot, but it's kind of like a trivia question. People can use this information, and they can get a free beer off their friends. Hey, do you know what D and D Day stands for? Oh, I don't know, dummy. What's it mean? Well, it stands for the amphibious assault, short for Decision Day or Designated Day. Some people have thought it meant Deliverance Day or Doomsday or Death Day. It doesn't really stand for any of those. Eisenhower once said that it stands for departed date. So it really means the day.
Yeah,
D
that's right.
stands
Yeah,
for
it
date.
just stands for the day. This it was the day that the thing was going to start. That's all that the
Yeah,
D stood for, was that was going to start.
yeah. So
Yeah,
D
I
stands for,
remember. I remember that now, and I'm confused by it still today.
yeah. It means day. The D,
Day. It's
the,
essentially a redundant. Yeah, it was the beginning of the attack. Essentially
yeah.
that.
And
Yeah, no.
so,
The story of D Day is just fantastic. I mean, the level of risk involved,
yeah.
the strategy. Everyone was extremely high risk strategy. Okay, and it won, but at huge cost.
And people,
The landing.
people don't get that anymore. These World War II are the old guys, the OGs out there, and they just
You know,
they don't really get into it the same way as they should.
yeah, it's for me. All of that is problematic. If we're able to easily distinguish things away as being really old history that's insignificant. I mean, so what does that mean about the Civil War? I mean, we get to distinguish that away, even though vestiges of the reasons for the war, right,
Yeah.
are still with us today. That
Oh, maybe.
people in the South, there are Southern whites who
Yeah.
still think that the war was all wrong, and that what is Texas politics like? What is Louisiana politics like? What is Mississippi politics like? Right?
Yeah.
Even Oklahoma,
Yeah.
it's all reflective of the history and the aftermath of the Civil War.
Yeah. Or maybe
So
we just want a new Civil War. I
Oh
mean, that's
man,
instead of
the
forgetting.
only people that say that easily, right, are the provocateurs on the right. You
Yeah,
know, they want a civil war. Nobody
yeah,
wants nobody in their right mind wants a civil war, but the people on the right want to threaten us with that. And
yeah,
the only reason that that threat has any strength coming from them is that they think they're superior. It's as
yeah,
simple as that.
yeah. I mention it only because you talked about how people, well, if we forget World War II, what about the Civil War? What about all the wars? Right? I mean, uh,
Exactly.
I I was glad that people
Exactly.
remembered World War One. People forgot World War One until a couple of years ago. They made a bigger deal about World War
Well,
One supposed to be the war to end all wars. It didn't
yeah,
do that.
but the aftermath of World War One was what caused World War Two.
Yes, and then
So,
also look, we can't forget these other wars that we easily don't even know existed. Like after the Spanish American War, the Philippine American War, which is
which is misnomered like crazy.
yeah, but it's a big war for us, our
It's
family.
a U.S. versus Philippines war. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
and we also well the Vietnam Wars. That was the
Well, that's
one that
one that everybody wants to put behind them, and
yeah,
the best evidence of that was the way that returning veterans were treated
yeah,
uh, during the, especially when it was clear that we were going to withdraw. You know, they were. Remember that the
yeah,
discussions. Well, you were just a kid in high school, though, but
yeah.
there was the discussions of around the table in
Oh yeah,
Paris about how
right.
the U.S. was going to withdraw. It is really
Yeah,
stupid, and it was the most lame kind of discussion about how the war would end. Right?
yeah, but the thing is, it was all predicated on this idea that we got to protect this area from communism. We got to protect this area from dropping like dominoes.
Yeah, the
And,
domino theory, which was
and
was really Korean War theory.
yeah, and if only if I mean it really was because young people didn't want to fight, were against the draft, got into this whole peace idea, humanity, love. I mean that kind of fueled it. The fueled and then the the coincidence of society changing as in the 60s the way it did. I mean that really kind of fueled an anti-war fervor that
Well, it became the notion of establishing peace and being anti-war. It was specific to Vietnam, okay, but
yeah,
at the same time, the general idea of peace and anti-war, all war, right, became a cultural factor.
yeah,
Okay, and it was a cultural factor in the biggest cities in the Western world. So
yeah,
as a result of that, right, it became an influential cultural factor on a national level, even here in the United States.
and
Uh,
it brought out all these other issues like race, anti-racism and
yes,
justice, social justice, and
yes.
even your thing, right? Ethnic
What?
studies, the call for
What?
ethnic
I
studies.
thought you meant my thing like free sex, but
Oh
no.
no, no, no.
Yeah,
Free ethnic studies, free ethnic studies.
yeah.
That was,
No.
I mean,
Well,
that came about from the consciousness of, yeah, you know, we're anti-war, we're pro-peace, we're pro-humanity, we're
it was
pro-ethnic
an
studies.
inclusion. It was it was part of the DEI. It's the I part. It was
Yeah,
inclusion because there had been clear, let's say, segregation of the history. Segregation was not just a social practice, a socio political practice, right?
mm,
As far as where people could live and what kind of
yeah,
jobs they could have, it also applied to the academy at all
mm,
levels. It applied to the whole educational institution. And
yeah,
so segregation meant exclusion from history, exclusion from sociology, exclusion from psychology. Everything was based on majority culture.
yeah. Well, I just wanted to bring it up. Not to could create another hour sidebar, but because it was so important in the development of your career there at the start of the student strike and all that. We'll have to talk about that again. But I just bring it up because we were talking about war and
Yeah,
D-Day.
well, a lot of us were influenced also by our parents who had experienced the Second World War.
Yeah,
Their whole notion of what they were fighting for, what they were struggling for, was from totalitarian governments, from dictatorships, and they were fighting for the survival of their own societies, their home societies.
yeah,
So we all grew up in that environment, right? Some of us were actually born in the quote the old country, right, from which our
yeah,
parents were, had left to come to the United States, and so that element of our personal experience, our familial experience, really influenced how we looked at the world when we got the opportunity to take an adult position on it. And that meant getting out of high school and going to college. But a lot of people were already activists. I certainly was one of them, was an anti war activist while I was in high school. So,
yeah. Well, and also, hey, as soon as you got a draft number, you were an activist.
well, you had to make a decision. Were you going to go or not?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And so most of the people around me went,
yeah.
unless they had a 2S deferment. So you had a large group of people, and around my social different social groups that I associated with, the majority of people went into the service. You know,
Yeah, I
it was a
was a little
class thing. It was a class thing, and a lot of working class people and middle class people went into the service.
sure. I was too young, so I got a late draft number when it hardly mattered. And so, but we need to talk about the class thing. We need to talk about the class thing at some point because it
Well,
seems
it's with us again. It's with us again, and
yeah,
it's one
class
of the
make,
reasons. Yeah, it's one of the reasons that Democrats are a losing party,
yeah,
is that
class.
they lost their connection to the working class, and I think the gap that you presently see really started during the Reagan administration, when unions started to capitulate to Reagan policies. Once they experienced the prosecution of Patco,
Yeah, once the Patco
the
smoke
air
happened,
traffic controllers. Yeah, and that's another ironic thing, right? That the
hey,
same issues that air traffic controllers are talking about now are exactly the same issues, even more so than what they were talking about back then, because now they're saying we have failing technology, right? And that technology was new 50 years ago, right?
yeah.
When Patco was saying, no, man, too much pressure, too many hours, right? Too few
Oh,
people.
but now they're making it totally class and not race, or
That's
they're
right.
making it about race
That's right.
by saying it's because we got to hire
DEI.
these
It's because you got all these DEI people that
yeah,
really don't belong, right? They're not qualified.
yeah,
They don't. They
yeah,
have no
we don't
understanding.
belong.
You know how hard it is to get one of those gigs, man.
Oh
You know the
yeah,
amount of training that they go through, and there's at least, as far as I know, there are at least a half dozen, maybe more, different levels that are assigned to airports, right? And
yeah,
so the higher the number, the more difficult the traffic. Okay,
oh
so
yeah,
a level 7 airport is much more difficult than a level 1, 2, 3, 4, right?
yeah.
Airport, and so you have to go through those stages of experience and development before you can even ask, to get assigned to some place like LaGuardia, or worse yet, Newark.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
like
no.
I like going into Newark. It really pisses me off, man, that it's so bad, because Newark, literally, it's like flying into Oakland. It's the equivalent of flying into the Oakland, right, and then coming over to San Francisco. It's just like that. If you
Yeah.
fly
It's
into
really
Newark, all you got to do is,
yeah.
just go over the tunnel, and go through the tunnel, and there you are. You're in downtown Manhattan. You come out of the tunnel, and there you are in downtown Manhattan, man. I mean, it's so cool. But
Well,
and then,
I don't know
if you got
exactly.
to go to
Well,
LaGuardia or Kennedy, it's like an hour to come back to get into the city.
yeah, Kennedy is bad.
Oh
LaGuardia a
man.
little better. LaGuardia a little better. Newark, when it works, it's okay, but I've always tried to avoid Newark actually. But now I don't know people, especially now. Now is like the
Oh
time
yeah.
to
Well, now it's really bad. But
yeah.
geez.
Yeah, yeah. All right,
But
so
well, I
Dan.
used to complain about having to fly into
Oh,
Dulles,
yeah.
because it's a 40-mile drive, right? But
The only time, yeah, you can get a round trip though, or
yeah,
nonstop. Is Dallas.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they force you through Dallas. Reagan. All right, look, Dan, we are swishing out, but
Right on.
I thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for
And
having me again.
oh, you're welcome. And
And boy, there was a whole lot of breaking news right when we're talking, man. Talk about
yeah,
a Friday.
we got SCOTUS, we got Kilmar Abrego,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and the big fig leaf. I mean, yeah,
Well, on to close out on Garcia, the only reason that they brought him back, right, was not only so they look good in
yeah.
terms of their relationship to SCOTUS and obeying Supreme Court decisions. I think that's a good thing. I think
Oh
that
yeah,
it shows that they understand that they cannot simply ignore federal court decisions, and at least because Trump said, "I will obey," right, SCOTUS decisions.
yeah,
But the only reason they're willing to do that is because they think they got him. They think
yeah.
they've got him on human trafficking.
Maybe we'll have to see. I don't know. I don't know
I
what
don't think they I don't know the facts of the case, right?
yeah.
But I think that they, as usual, think that the law is entirely on their side, and that their argument based on the facts as they know them are going to be a winning argument. But they've
I
been losing everywhere else.
Yeah, I will say this: they have a law and order excuse. Bring them back, and that's all you need. Hey, law and order. We're gonna get them.
We're going to give them due process. Yeah, but
We don't need them in a jail. We're gonna get them here.
well, yeah, I agree. That's
And so
exactly the attitude. But then what about the
that's
200 other folks?
you got to ask yourself. Well, they have nothing. So why are they there? They're there for whatever reason. Give them the due process.
Yeah, well, they want
Uh,
to give people free haircuts.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. That's all you get down there in El Salvador. Hey, listen, Dan, thank you, and thank and check out. I'll check out Patreon, or maybe I'll send you a link. My 20-minute show that I did at the Marsh, and also if you're free, WSOC, the World Series of Comedy, June 11th, 7 p.m. Laughs Unlimited. That's a Wednesday, June 11th, Old Sacramento. If you go to VIPTicketHub.com /unlimited tickets, you put in the code GIVE GIVE, say I sent you, and you get discount tickets.
All right.
I think it's usually like a $30 ticket, and it's
Woo.
down to 12 or 13. But it's
Wow. That's a hell of a discount.
I'm appearing with like 15 comics. We're competing for this World Series of Comedy. So it's me against the World Series. So, Steve Martin, let's see, who else? Who else is there? Henny Youngman, Joan Rivers, all the greats. All the greats. I got to
So
compete against the ghosts.
they have been reincarnated. They've been reincarnated.
George Carlin, he'll be there.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and so yeah, I mean it's actually local comics.
You know who I miss Erwin Corey.
Professor
Professor
Erwin
Erwin
Corey.
I miss him.
I miss Professor Erwin. I miss Gilbert Gottfried.
Well, he's a lot younger though. I mean, he's
But
recent.
he's dead.
I know he's dead, but he's recent.
Very recent. I miss the aristocrats. And then we came in.
He was
And
good.
then the sisters doing the brother, and doing the mother, and doing the father, and then they're all.
Yeah, he was
And
really
then
good.
the mother was doing this to the sister. That's the clean version. And then the father was doing this.
The way he squinches up his face and gets it all
Yeah,
tight
yeah.
eyes and
Hey,
squinches up
hey,
his face.
hey, yeah. I like it. I like that. Yeah. So that's good. Gilbert, yeah, I miss Gilbert. Gilbert.
All right. All
All
right,
right. So
dude. Thank you
thank
very
you
much
very
for
much.
having me once again.
Yeah, and thank you. And then go. Okay, no,
Patreon
Pacers.
and go and whoever
Yeah.
Thunder versus Pacer, whatever.
All right. There he goes, Daniel Phil Gonzalez, College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University, Professor Emeritus, Asian American Studies. We talked to him because we got to talk. He's Professor Emeritus. He's got things on his mind. So I got to, I can talk to him about these things. We talked about a lot of stuff. Kilmar, Abrego Garcia. We talked about AAPI hate numbers from Stop AAPI Hate. We talked about Elon and Trump and the white on white hate crime. If you missed any of that, go back. Just take your finger and go back, and or this tape will repeat. Hey, like I said, I'll put something on my Patreon. Patreon at Emil Amok, Emil Amok's Takeout. Um, my 20-minute thing. I gotta put it for sale. Maybe I can pay for my account. And then if you want to see me perform stand up, which is different. I mean, this is talking. I'm talking. We're conversing about the news, but and it's different from the Marsh thing, which is storytelling. This is stand up. I'm going to do at Laughs Unlimited in Old Sac. If you're near Old Sac, don't mind the drive up Highway 5. It's pretty easy. World Series of Comedy, June 11th, a Wednesday night. Go get tickets at VIPTicketHub.com, unlimited tickets /unlimited tickets. You can see it on the screen. Do the code word GIVE, GIVE, say Emil Amok sent you, and get your big discount on tickets. And no, it's great. It's great if you can show up. I've done stand up for, I've dabbled in stand up for years, but not dabbled in the way I've been dabbling the last maybe 2-3 years. And I like it. It's just, the stand up is about laughs, getting your high laughs per minute. Storytelling is different. It's about the narrative flow and telling stories and with this arc de triomphe when people laugh at the end. And this is just news talk radio, where I can play with my swisher. But it's not really common. It's more talking. We talk here. Anyway. So thank you for being here. Please repeat and watch again. We leave with a little meditation because I ultimately like doing nothing. Doing nothing is a superior stance. Nothing. Yeah, I'm doing nothing. And a little loving kindness is good. When you're doing nothing with love, that is like so good. That is like the best. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Ease, I said ease, ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Mahal Kita.